Dead men tell no tales, but their ships speak volumes. Welcome to the Cursed Compass, where we explore the darkest maritime mysteries. On the morning of Friday, August 21, 1857, a violent winter gale was mercilessly battering the coast of Sydney. A local resident walking the shore noticed something strange thrashing in the water. It was the carcass of a cow, surrounded by sharks tearing into the meat. But from the top of the sandstone cliff known as the Gap, a much larger horror came into view. The turbulent surf below was choked with pulverized wood, shattered cargo, and human bodies. As harbor workers began pulling debris from the freezing water, they recovered passenger pocket watches. Every single one of them had stopped at exactly midnight. This shattered graveyard was all that remained of a 122-person voyage. For hours, authorities were left staring at the wreckage, trying to understand how an entire community could be lost in a single turn of the helm. The answer wouldn't come until nearly 36 hours later. Looking down the sheer rock face, searchers spotted a faint flutter of clothing stranded on a narrow ledge 10 meters above the crashing waves. Rescuers hoisted up a 20-year-old Irish able-seaman named James Johnson. He was freezing, drenched, and completely delirious. Out of the 122 people on board, Johnson was the only person left breathing. His memory held the sole witness testimony to explain why the Dunbar had steered directly into the cliffs. 3 months earlier, in May 1857, the Dunbar set sail. Built with British oak, Indian teak, and reinforced by 45 tons of protective iron knees, she was the flagship of the Dunbar line. The 1850s Australian gold rush had created a massive demand for fast, luxurious transport, and wealthy immigrants were paying a premium for passage to the colonies. Life on board was strictly ordered. First-class passengers adhered to rigorous daily cleanings, communal 8 a.m. breakfasts, and Sunday church services on the deck. The manifest included Marian Egan, returning to Sydney with her 2 children and their prized Russian wolfhound. They carried fine furniture, perfume, and deep optimism for their new life. For 81 days, the voyage was peaceful and routine. But that meticulously ordered journey was destined to stop violently, right at the threshold of their destination. By the evening of August 20th, Sydney was only hours away. At the 6 p.m. dinner bell, passengers toasted their successful crossing. Then, at 7:30, the weather snapped. A blinding 60-kilometer-per-hour gale ripped across the water, driving massive 5-meter swells directly against the ship's hull. By 10 p.m., visibility dropped to 0. Captain James Green faced a critical dilemma: hold his position out at sea and weather the storm, or risk a blind run for the safety of the harbor. Green opted to run for port. But in the lashing rain, he misjudged his geography, steering the ship directly toward the solid rock of the coastal cliffs instead of the open channel. At midnight, the Dunbar struck the 60-meter sandstone wall. The hull split completely open, and the towering teak masts snapped like twigs. A single navigational error, compounded by immense environmental pressure, converted a state-of-the-art vessel into an inescapable trap in a matter of seconds. When the news reached Sydney, the city shut down. Banks and offices closed their doors as a collective shock settled over the colony. A funeral procession rolled through the muddy streets. 20,000 citizens, over a third of the city's population, stood in the rain to watch hearses carry the mostly unrecognizable dead. The recovered victims were taken to Camperdown Cemetery, where they were buried together in a single massive tomb. This tragedy forced the young colony to confront its geographic isolation and its absolute vulnerability to the sea. Driven by public outcry, authorities immediately overhauled maritime infrastructure, installing reliable telegraph lines and a storm-ready pilot boat service. Most importantly, they constructed the Hornby Lighthouse right at the tip of South Head to clearly mark the actual harbor entrance. This distinct red and white tower provided a crucial contrast to the older Macquarie Lighthouse, the very light that had factored into Captain Green's fatal miscalculation. Maritime safety evolved after that night, but the physical anchor at the Gap remains. It stands as a memorial to the 121 people who reached the very doorstep of home, only to be lost to the surf.